Hey everyone, this is Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 112 of Album of the Day, in which today I'm going to talk about an album from an indie rock band from Virginia that have sort of developed sort of a cult following, pretty much releasing EP. It's technically kind of it used to be kind of the indie rock lo-fi music project of singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Will Toledo. Released a bunch of EPs on like Bandcamp and developed sort of a cult following from there. And the band I'm talking about is Seat Headrest, and the name, in case you didn't know, comes from Will Toledo. He used to record the demos, some of the original demos, at the backseat of his car. Now it's sort of evolved into a full band, pretty much. Their Matador Records debut was released in 2015, called Teens of Style, which I actually haven't really heard that record, but I'm here to talk about, their second Matador release, and this is pretty much their first album, pretty much as a full kind of collective band, pretty much. And I assume this is probably going to be their breakthrough album, pretty much. And, it was released in May this year, but didn't come out physically until July, so I finally got a CD copy of it when it was out. The album is called Teens of Denial. And, this is, Car Seat Headrest, sort of, definitely can be described as a lot of things, from lo-fi to indie rock to emo and stuff like that. Stuff like that. Okay, anyway, sorry for that moment of silence there, but anyway, this is what the CD looks like. There's cover art there, and a lot of critics and reviewers on YouTube and people like that have definitely had a lot of praise to say about this record. Anyway, here are the liner notes, and there's a disc over there. And, just some black underneath it. And it was produced by Steve Fisk, who's kind of a, legendary Seattle producer, pretty much. Not that I'm too familiar with his work, but anyway, this booklet thing here has all the lyrics on there. Hometown Heroes and Cosmic Heroes. I don't know if that's like certain parts of it, but like it's, yeah. Yeah, and that's packaging for Teens of Denial. Now, this is a great record, but I will tell you this, probably not all mainstream music fanatics are really going to find this album appealing, pretty much, because this record, it's very lo-fi and all that stuff, so it's definitely going to appeal to indie rock fans, the way I am a pretty big fan of that kind of genre. But, also, like, this record, it's a lengthy record. It is 12 songs, like a normal studio record, but it lasts over an hour and 10 minutes, so that's definitely one thing that's definitely not going to appeal to everyone. There are probably going to be complaints that this record is way too long or something like that, and stuff like that, but, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because still, although this record is lengthy, and it has a few meh moments on it, for the most part, it's a really great album, has a lot to keep you engaged throughout the whole time, with some great songwriting, and really great and very well performed instruments, and some very unusual little instrumental things here and there, which would be either like a mellotron or strings, or which would be either like a mellotron or some horns or something like that, and some organ as well. And also like the vocals, they are kind of slow and lazy and just really deep. You see what I'm saying here? Which, he's the kind of voice that, he has the kind of singing voice that people are either going to love or hate, because, like, his voice is, like, so akin to Julian Casablancas on any given Strokes song, good or bad, as Anthony Fantano said in his review for the record, which is pretty much how I discovered Seat Headrest, watching his review of this album. And he did really like it, so I thought, well, I should probably check this out. But anyway, aside from a little bit of a kind of a lowdown, sort of the main idea of this record, let's get on to the review pretty much. So the opening track on here is Fill in the Blank, which has these really awesome, like, just syncopated guitars and drums on it. The opening guitar line right off the bat, I think is going to get you hooked, pretty much. It's just so melodic, pretty much, and, has a really great chorus on this track. There's definitely, like, I feel this is the perfect way to open this record, because right off the bat, it definitely gets you pretty much, hooked in, pretty much. The lyrics sort of, talking about how, like, the lyrics on this record definitely deal with, like, clinical depression and, stuff like that, and, like that. And I know we may not necessarily be the most unique or poetic or the most just esoteric lyricist, but he definitely has a lot to say that you can definitely relate to. He sort of talks about how he's sort of got a right to be depressed and, all that kind of stuff, pretty much. Then there's the very next track, Vincent, which has sort of a long intro. Like, the version of Vincent that I first heard of the song is actually different from the one that's on the record. The version I first heard was actually just a 4-minute version of the song. It was obviously with the music video for it. Right. And the intro, video for it, but the version that's on the record actually has a long sort of 3-minute guitar intro, pretty much right before the vocal comes in. But I like how they definitely keep it interesting and intricate enough that the intro won't bore you or anything like that. And but then eventually, once it builds up, it just it's got like this just roaring, just kind of drony guitar with a heavy tremolo effect on it. It's like wah wah on there, and see, stuff like that. And then of course, this is one song that really shows some of Will Toledo's like songwriting skills, pretty much. Like much on here, which shows how a lot of people have said that this album actually is a big step forward from Teens of Style, pretty much, in terms of how well written the songs are. And I haven't really listened to the record, but I've definitely heard lots of people say that about it. And I love the part where and also, like, there's some really great instrumentation on this track. Like, of course, the guitar playing on this track is absolutely killer, as well as some really great horns that come in the middle, and these weird kind of, like, keyboard kind of sounds going on, and, like, the background and stuff like that. and plus, a really great chorus on this track. So there are definitely lots of things that make this song easily one of my favorite tracks on the record. And then next you get Destroyed by Hippie Powers, which is one of like the more louder, kind of punky tracks on the record. There's actually a little bit of post-punk incorporated into the sound of this record too. Like, right off the bat, like, this is the one song that's pretty loud and clear right from the start, pretty much. Much as well as, and also like the song contains plenty of cowbell pretty much on it. And I love how this song sort of deals with him kind of being so kind of frustrated by like all these like by like kind of this hippie kind of community that he's really tired of pretty much. And I love how he says, "Well, tell my mother I'm coming home because I've been destroyed by hippie powers." And he definitely, and vocally, he definitely does go nuts on this track, especially in that part where he talks about the chubby little kid that smiles so much and loves the Beach Boys, pretty much, and talking about like taking his name and stuff like that. Just love how he's really just having a meltdown on here, pretty much, pretty much. So yeah, like definitely a great track for sure. The next song, the next song on here is called "Joe Gets Kicked Out of School for Using Drugs with Friends That Says It Isn't a Problem." Pretty long title, but this is definitely another track on here where I really do see some of Will Toledo's songwriting prowess, pretty much. These lyrics, I think I can sort of relate to, although he's probably gone through sort of worse problems than me. He's definitely a guy you can relate to lyrically. I mean, he definitely has that kind of same sort of angsty sort of attitude that maybe someone like Rivers Cuomo would have, pretty much. And speaking of Rivers Cuomo, check out the new Weezer album if you can. Really good album. Pretty much. I mean, you could disagree with his philosophy all you want, but I definitely do think he definitely has a lot to say that definitely makes a lot of sense. And also, do like some of the, phrases that Will Toledo sort of, gets out on the song Vincent. Sadism. Like that. I think Joe gets kicked out of school. I think is a really kind of clever song. He sort of mentions how he's just kind of a teen of style, pretty much, and he's wondering who he is. He's kind of because he's feeling kind of hung up, pretty much. And he says he feels like a walking piece of shit in a stupid looking jacket, like excuse my language there, but like you pretty much get what I'm talking about here, right? So yeah, I definitely do think there's a little bit of a sense of humor to this album, pretty much. And sort of talking about how drugs are better with friends, pretty much. The song "Not What I Needed" is actually a song that actually was supposed to incorporate the Cars song with the same name, but due to a lawsuit, pretty much, Will actually had to rewrite the song because like all the copies of the record pretty much got destroyed. So that's one example of Matador just getting into real panic in terms of the marketing for this record, pretty much. But I do really like some of the smart, like sort of witty lyrics on this track. Like, I've been waiting for some real good porn. Here, and of course, like and stuff like that. And like the ending of this track is kind of weird. I mean, it's kind of a the ending of this track is is like actually kind of sort of looped backwards pretty much. Like the guitar improvisation at the end is actually sort of on a backwards loop here, but yet it still sounds really explosive, and I think they really sort of pulled it off there with that outro there. And you can really feel and like Will's vocals on this track are pretty raw. Sometimes sounds more like he's just kind of saying something, just kind of letting out his emotions, like in the part where he says, "I know when I'm being catered to," on there. And then there's the song "Drunk Drivers, Killer Whales," which is another one of it's another track that has some pretty catchy and memorable hooks on it, but also lyrics sort of talking about drunk driving just being kind of a bad idea pretty much. He's sort of trying to get home and he's in a really sort of kind of terrible situation pretty much. Like he's trying to rationalize it and stuff like that, and sort of mentioning how doesn't have to be like this. And plus I do like sort of it starts out pretty stripped down with like a muted mellotron, and then eventually it builds up into just sort of an explosive sort of indie rock sort of song structure pretty much on here. So yeah, definitely another track that I highly recommend. And then there's this, so that's sort of the closing of like the first half of the record. But then for the second half of the record, it opens up with 1937 State Park, which is another track on here that I really love. And pretty much he's sort of talking about sort of some of the weakness that he has pretty much, and he's talking about like he's mentioning how his pain is his own, and and when the cops shook him down, he cried walking home pretty much, and also sort of mention, and I like sort of the wordplay on this track, like Death playing his xylophone rips for him, and and also do really like how explosive sort of the hook on this track is, and also like I like the kind of dramatic organ solo in the middle as well. Definitely one of my favorite instrumental moments on the album. The next track, Unforgiving Girl, She's Not Ann, is probably my least favorite track on the thing, mostly because, it has some kind of cliched lyrics on it that kind of had me roll in my eyes a little bit, as well as a very redundant refrain towards the end of, it's an unforgiving world, but she's not an unforgiving girl. It gets, kind of tedious, pretty much, so that's why it's the one track that, was kind of a letdown for me. But then, the song Cosmic Hero that follows up really makes up for it with some really great lyrics on that track, and sort of, dealing with death pretty much and stuff like that, and sort of talking about he will go to heaven, but his significant other won't, and stuff like that. Some pretty dark lyrics on this track, as well as a really great horn intro that opens it up, and it just has... And the ending of this track is just really explosive, and it's definitely one of my favorite parts of the record. It's just how explosive some of the endings of these songs are. And then following that is by far the longest song on the record, the 11-minute epic, the Ballad of the Costa, Concordia. And I know this is one that's going to require some patience, and some people are probably going to say this track is kind of boring or stuff like that, but, me personally, I love this track. I mean, like, just easily probably some of the best songwriting on the whole record comes from this tune. And like I love that part in the middle where he goes into just this kind of obsessive like spoken word kind of dirge where he's like, how am I supposed to know to use a tube amp? How am I supposed to know to ride a bike without hurting myself? How was I supposed to know to make dinner for myself? It's just an on and on kind of circle that he's in pretty much, but it just sounds so interesting. I essentially listen to him just kind of explain his thoughts to, not like a therapist, but rather sort of, talking to the audience as if they're his peers pretty much. And it has like 4 different pieces to it that I think are all really interesting. Like the song just builds into an explosive ending, faster sort of ending, and then it closes out with kind of a somber sort of, segment with like a mellotron and, lyrics about dreaming that he was swimming in the river and holding someone in his arms pretty much. And then there's the song Connect the Dots, the saga of Frank Sinatra, which is another pretty punky moment on the record. Key moment on here, and, has a really nice saxophone that comes in, in the middle. It's kind of it's kind of squealing and raw pretty much. Yeah, it's really kind of stuttering at the end pretty much. And, talking about a little boy who, is wondering what he should do with his hands. And, he's sort of reflecting on how, his parents know it's a lot to remember, pretty much. And then it closes with an acoustic outro track, Joe Goes to School, which, is kind of just something, which, is kind of, in my opinion, I think it was only put at the end just because it was, the most stripped down or simple track pretty much, because it's kind of a meh acoustic outro that kind of closes out the record. But really, for the most part, I do recommend you give this thing a listen if you can. I mean, if you love indie rock, if you want some good, and if you're looking for that emo music that's not just a stereotypical, sort of brand of emo, but rather just an emotionally dense and just dense and very well written record in terms of emo, or if you want a good post-punk record, and if you're looking if you're looking for that lo-fi indie rock that you sort of miss now, well then I definitely do think you're gonna like this record. Just just be patient with its long runtime pretty much. So yeah, I think I'm feeling I'm feeling like kind of a decent 8 out of 10 for the new Seat Headrest record, Teens of Denial. And I'll see you for episode 113.